Okay, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something pretty huge, something everyone wants, a truly fulfilling life. And, our listeners, you guys have pointed us towards some really key areas we need to unpack. Health, how we deal with the past, and that feeling of excitement, that real zest for life. We're going to dig into these, figure out why they matter so much, and hopefully come away with some solid takeaways that you can put into action right away. Think of it as a crash course in, living well without getting bogged down in all the complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been looking closely at what you've shared, and it's fascinating how these three elements, your well-being, carrying baggage from the past, and that genuine enthusiasm for life, they're all so interconnected. When you boost one, it often has a ripple effect on the others. Like if you're feeling physically and mentally strong, you're more likely to have the energy to face those past challenges and even get excited about pursuing new passions.
Right, makes sense. Okay, so let's start with something pretty fundamental, something we all know is important, but often gets pushed aside in our busy lives, our health. It's like the material you sent over really hits home with this.
Yeah.
You could achieve so much, but if your health is struggling, it kind of takes the shine off everything, doesn't it?
For sure. It's really easy to fall into the trap of prioritizing everything else, work, commitments, you name it, over our own well-being. Almost like we think our bodies are these tireless machines that can just keep going and going without any consequences.
It's true. And the material we have here, it actually highlights some pretty significant downsides to that kind of neglect. Things like always feeling drained, getting sick more often, just that lack of motivation to do anything. And even that mentions like a kind of mental fogginess.
Yeah. And those aren't just minor inconveniences, right?
Yeah.
They can really affect how you experience life, your ability to enjoy things, to be present.
Absolutely. So what's the wake-up call? How do you know it's time to make some changes? Well, the material points to a pretty clear signal. That constant feeling of being exhausted or just not feeling quite right. It's basically your body saying, hey, pay attention. We need to switch things up.
Yeah, and the good news is the material also offers some really practical steps you can take. It's not about making these massive, overwhelming changes overnight. It's about consistency, building those healthy habits bit by bit.
So what are we talking about specifically?
Well, think about incorporating regular movement into your day. Even just 20 minutes of walking or finding some other activity you enjoy, it can have a surprisingly big impact on your energy levels, your mood, your overall physical health.
Right, so even small amounts can make a difference.
Absolutely. And then there's diet. We often underestimate how much our food choices affect how we feel day to day. Cutting back on processed foods and sugar can be a game changer for some people.
I can definitely see that.
And of course, sleep. It's such a crucial piece of the puzzle. The material really stresses aiming for that consistent 7 to 9 hours each night and resisting the temptation to sacrifice sleep for, late night work or scrolling through social media. That lack of sleep, it builds up and affects everything.
Definitely. It's tempting though, right? I know I've been guilty of it myself.
Yeah, for sure. And one more thing to add to the mix is stress management. Incorporating things like mindfulness, even taking a few minutes to journal your thoughts or practice deep breathing exercises. These aren't just trendy things. They're really effective ways to manage the pressures of everyday life and protect both your physical and mental health.
They can be real lifesavers, those techniques. So the takeaway here, if we're looking at the big picture, is that your body is the one constant you have throughout your entire life. Taking care of it isn't some kind of optional extra. It's essential.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than that, right? Because neglecting your health, it actually limits your capacity to be fully present in your life, to pursue your passions, to enjoy the things that matter to you. It's the foundation for everything else. That's
a really powerful way to put it. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about taking care of ourselves in the present, but what about the past? How we deal with it, how it affects us. The material we have here really dives deep into that idea of being stuck in the past. And it asks a really pointed question. Are you truly living in the now, or are you constantly revisiting those past events?
It's amazing how that past can creep into our present, sometimes in really subtle ways, shaping our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced that to some degree. So how do you know if you're letting the past hold you back? What are the signs?
Well, the material highlights some common ones, like constantly replaying old mistakes in your mind, dwelling on hurts or betrayals, or focusing on missed opportunities as if they define you. It's like carrying this invisible weight that weighs you down.
And what's the cost of carrying that weight? What happens when we stay stuck in the past?
The material is pretty clear about that. Clinging to the past, It robs you of your future. It drains your energy, keeps you focused on what was instead of what could be.
It makes sense when you think about it that way. So how do we break free? How do we move forward?
Well, the material offers some really helpful ways to reframe the past. Instead of seeing it as this permanent sentence hanging over you, try to view it as a collection of lessons learned.
So turning those negative experiences into something positive.
Exactly. If you're constantly reliving those past mistakes without actually taking away the learning, it prevents you from growing, from moving forward. It keeps you tied to those old narratives.
That's a good point. So what are some of the strategies for letting go and actually moving on?
Well, the material emphasizes acceptance, really acknowledging what happened, both the good and the bad, and choosing to focus on the lessons you can take from it. And then there's forgiveness. This is huge. Letting go of resentment, it's primarily for your benefit. It frees you from that emotional baggage, regardless of whether the other person ever takes responsibility.
Wow. Yeah, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself. So we've accepted things. We've worked on forgiveness. What's next?
Well, the material brings it back to the present moment and encourages you to ask, what can I do today that will contribute to a better future? It's such an empowering question because it shifts your focus from what was to what can be. You might not be able to change what happened, but you have so much control over your choices right now and how they shape your future.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah.
So let's move on to something that adds that real spark to life. Excitement. I mean, when was the last time you felt genuinely excited about something, like really, truly excited? That's what the material asks us to consider.
It's so easy to lose that initial enthusiasm as we get caught up in the routines and demands of adult life, isn't it?
It really is. So how do you know if you've maybe slipped into that kind of autopilot mode where life just feels like a series of obligations instead of opportunities?
Okay.
Well, the material suggests that if you're struggling to remember a time when you felt that genuine excitement, that could be a sign.
And it goes on to suggest that a major reason for that fading excitement is a lack of novelty, a lack of challenge. When life becomes too predictable, too routine, that natural enthusiasm we all have tends to wane.
Yeah. It's like our brains crave those new experiences, those challenges to overcome.
Exactly. So thinking back to childhood, the material beautifully illustrates how, as kids, we found that wonder and excitement in the simplest things. A new toy, exploring the backyard, even just the anticipation of a holiday.
So how do we recapture some of that magic as adults? How do we reignite that spark?
Well, the material gives us some really concrete steps we can take. One is to actively seek out new experiences. Whether it's trying a new hobby, taking a class in something that interests you, even exploring a different part of your city. It's about injecting that element of novelty back into your life.
Okay, so get out of our comfort zones a bit. What else?
Setting goals. And I'm talking about ambitious but achievable goals, something that genuinely excites you but also feels a little bit daunting. That sense of purpose and anticipation can be so motivating.
It's like you're stretching yourself a bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this ties back to what we talked about earlier, not being held back by the past, focusing on those exciting new goals, it naturally pulls you forward.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions from the material?
Yeah, it also talks about the importance of who you surround yourself with. Being around people who are passionate, who are engaged in their own lives, that energy can be contagious.
So true. Their enthusiasm can rub off on you.
Absolutely. And finally, cultivating that sense of curiosity, constantly asking questions, exploring new subjects, embracing that lifelong learner mindset, that drive to understand the world, it fuels excitement.
Yeah, it keeps things fresh, keeps you engaged. So it seems like it all boils down to being intentional, doesn't it? Living with purpose.
Exactly. Like the material says, that's the key to feeling that renewed sense of excitement for life. It's about making conscious choices to connect with the world around you and seek out those experiences that bring you joy and make you feel truly alive.
So as we wrap things up here, I want to ask you, our listener, to reflect on what we've discussed today. Did any of these points, neglecting your well-being, feeling trapped by the past, or struggling with a lack of excitement, did any of those really hit home for you? Recognizing those patterns, that's the first step towards making a positive change. You can start today.
Yeah, and as you think about those three areas, which one stands out to you the most? Which one feels like it holds the most potential for positive transformation in your life if you were to really focus on it?
Here's a final thought to leave you with. Think about how these three areas, health, the past, and excitement, how they all connect and influence each other. What if you focused on just one? Maybe a small, consistent change, maybe a commitment to your health, or working on letting go of a past hurt, or trying something brand new. It's amazing how that one action could create a ripple effect, positively influencing the other areas in ways you might not expect. So what's that one step you can take today, that one small, deliberate action that could start to shift your whole experience for the better? It all begins with that first intentional move.